The rain fell in silver streaks against the wide windows of Sweet Memories Bakery, blurring the streets beyond into watercolor shades of gray and gold. Inside, the air smelled of sugar, cinnamon, and fresh bread, warm scents that wrapped around the handful of customers huddled against the storm. Yet at a corner table, beneath lace curtains that swayed gently from the draft of the door, sat Eva Lancaster, her figure a study in stillness against the soft hum of life around her. She sat in her wheelchair, unmoving, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her pale face. Before her was a simple white cake, no decorations, no balloons, no laughter. Only a small, fragile flame trembled atop 22 thin candles, their light reflected in her unshed tears. It was her birthday, though it felt less like a celebration and more like a reminder of everything she had lost. 4 years ago, Eva had been full of dreams, a dancer in training, a young woman who lived for motion, for the music that carried her across polished stages. But one red light, one drunken driver, and one moment of terrible silence had stolen all of that away. She had awoken in a hospital bed to the sterile voice of doctors, to machines humming, to her father's cold mask as he discussed her condition as though it were a business deal. She would never walk again. The words had cut deeper than the broken bones ever could. Her father, Richard Lancaster, was the kind of man newspapers admired and employees feared. The powerful CEO of Lancaster Technologies, he shaped markets with a signature and commanded respect with a glance. But he had no time for weakness, and after the accident, he saw nothing but weakness in his daughter. He gave her the best doctors, the best nurses, a mansion full of luxuries. But he could not give her himself. Her birthdays were marked by deposits into her account and cold text messages. Holidays passed with strangers on payroll wishing her well. It had been years since she felt truly seen, truly held. And now, on her 22nd birthday, she found herself staring at a cake in a bakery, pretending she didn't care that, no. One sat across from her. The door chimed. A gust of wind slipped inside with the smell of rain and earth, carrying the voices of a man and a child. Eva turned her head just slightly, curious despite herself. A tall man stepped in, about 30 years old, with broad shoulders that spoke of labor rather than gym routines. His hair was damp from the storm, his white t-shirt clinging to him. He carried a small cardboard cake box in his hands, careful not to jostle it as he closed the door. Beside him skipped a little girl, no more than 6, her yellow dress bright against the gloom of the day. Her hair was tied in 2 playful braids, her eyes shining with the kind of hope only children seemed capable of holding on to. She clutched a tiny cupcake, its frosting carefully preserved despite her small fingers gripping it tightly. They were so full of life, this father and daughter, that their presence shifted the air in the bakery. Customers glanced up, smiled, then returned to their conversations. But the little girl didn't look around. Her gaze had locked instantly onto Eva. She tugged urgently at her father's shirt. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice earnest. "She's all alone." Eva blinked, startled. Was the child talking about her? She looked down at the cake before her, at the flickering candles no one had bothered to count with her, at the empty chair across the table. Yes, she supposed she was all alone. The man followed his daughter's gaze, his brow furrowing when he saw the young woman in the wheelchair, her expression carefully blank. For a long moment, he seemed to weigh something inside himself. Then, guided more by his daughter's insistence than by calculation, he stepped forward. "Excuse me," his voice was low, warm, careful not to intrude. He gestured gently toward his daughter. "May we join you?" Eva stiffened. Strangers did not speak to her, not like this. They looked, sometimes, with pity or discomfort or curiosity, but never with warmth, never with the simple audacity of offering company. She turned her face toward him fully, and for the first time she truly saw him. His eyes were kind, lined with sorrow yet steady. And behind him, the little girl stood clutching her cupcake like it was treasure. "I'm Lily," the child declared before Eva could answer. She marched forward, placing her cupcake proudly on the table. A star-shaped candle wobbled in the frosting. "This is for you. I made it with Daddy this morning. We come here every year today because it's my mommy's birthday, too. She's in heaven. But Daddy says she still sees us when we celebrate." The words hit Eva with the force of a wave. The innocence, the sincerity, the way death and love were bound together in the child's heart. It pierced through the walls. She had built so carefully. She pressed her lips together to keep from trembling. The man, Daniel, as he would soon introduce himself, pulled out a chair with unhurried grace. "I'm Daniel," he said softly. "That's a beautiful cake. You have, but no one should have to celebrate alone." Eva stared at him, at the child who had offered her a piece of her heart, at the cake box he held as though it mattered more than the rain-soaked world outside. Something tight and aching unfurled inside her. For the first time in years, she felt tears rise not from sorrow, but from the fragile possibility of being seen. Lily hopped onto the chair beside her, legs swinging. Without hesitation, she began to sing Happy Birthday, her little voice slightly off-key but pure. Daniel's baritone joined in, weaving with his daughter's melody until the quiet bakery filled with unexpected harmony. Customers turned to watch. Smiling, Eva closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. She made a wish. Not for her legs to work again, not for riches or miracles. Just for something simple, something she hadn't dared to ask. For in 4 long years, she wished not to be alone anymore. And as their voices lifted around her, as warmth replaced the ache in her chest, she wondered if just maybe her wish was already beginning to come true. In the days that followed their unexpected meeting, Eva found herself thinking about Daniel and Lily more often than she cared to admit. What had begun as a fleeting kindness over a birthday cake quickly blossomed into something she could not ignore. She started noticing the empty silence in her home even more acutely, the way the rooms echoed with absence instead of warmth, and how her father's mansion seemed to grow larger and colder each day. By contrast, the memory of Lily's bright laughter and Daniel's calm, steady presence lingered like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. When Daniel invited her to meet them again at the park, she surprised herself by agreeing. It was there, beneath the willows by the pond, that she watched Lily toss breadcrumbs to a flock of ducks, her small hands animated as she explained which ones were her favorites and how she believed each duck had its own family and story. Eva felt something stir inside her, something that had been dormant since the accident. Daniel sat quietly beside her, never pressing, never rushing, simply allowing her to exist without judgment. His silence was not empty like her father's. It was a space where she felt safe to breathe. Their conversations began with small things, like the weather, the books Eva had been reading, or the little carvings Daniel worked on in his shop. Then they drifted into deeper waters. Daniel shared stories of his late wife, Sarah, not with grief that consumed him, but with a tenderness that had softened over the years. He described how she had filled their tiny apartment with murals of enchanted forests, how she believed every child carried a world of possibilities within them, and how her courage during pregnancy remained etched in his heart forever. The way he spoke of her revealed not only his love for what he had lost, but also his ability to carry that love forward, rather than be destroyed by it. Eva listened, captivated, and found herself offering pieces of her own truth. At first, she spoke clinically about the accident, about the driver who ran the red light, about the sensation of weightlessness before the impact, about the moment she woke to realize her life would never be the same. Slowly, however, her words shifted, and she revealed the deeper pain. The way her father had treated her like a corporate liability, the way nurses filled the void where family should have been, and the suffocating emptiness of a mansion that had everything except love. Daniel did not interrupt. He didn't try to fix her or offer solutions. He simply listened, and in that listening she found the courage to be vulnerable in a way she had not dared for years. Lily, with her boundless energy, often broke into their heavy conversations with an innocence that saved them from being swallowed by sorrow. She declared that Eva's wheelchair was actually a magical throne, invented elaborate games where sadness was just another color to paint with, and insisted on asking each day if Eva was happy. For Eva, it was disarming and healing all at once. She realized that Lily did not see her as broken. She saw her as important, as someone who belonged in their world. One afternoon at a small coffee shop, Eva laughed at something Lily had done, her voice ringing with genuine joy. Daniel looked at her in that moment and felt a quiet shift inside himself. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, but a recognition that she had begun to matter deeply, not as someone to protect or pity, but as someone whose presence enriched both his and his daughter's lives. Their eyes met across the table, and time seemed to hold them still. Eva saw the softness in his gaze and felt her own guarded heart tremble. Daniel reached out, his fingers brushing hers just enough to bridge the distance. His voice, low and steady, affirmed what she feared to hope for, that they were there not because of sympathy, but because she made their days better, because she made them better. Tears filled her eyes, not of despair, but of gratitude and longing. She whispered that she did not know how to do this, to which Daniel answered that neither did he, but perhaps together they could learn. Their relationship grew like a carefully tended garden, small moments of joy watering seeds of trust. Daniel adjusted chairs without being asked, ensuring her comfort as though it was second nature. Eva read aloud to Lily, giving each character a unique voice until the little girl dissolved in laughter. Lily taught Eva to fold origami cranes, declaring that 1,000 would make wishes come true. And through it all, Daniel watched with quiet admiration, recognizing in Eva not just resilience, but radiance. What Eva did not know was that her father was watching from afar. Richard Lancaster had always considered control the foundation of power, and the thought of his daughter forming a bond beyond his influence unsettled him deeply. The moment his staff mentioned Eva's outings with a widower and his child, Richard's suspicions hardened into resolve. In his world, men of modest means could only have one motive for seeking proximity to wealth. He hired investigators who delivered reports of Eva laughing with Daniel, of Lily holding her hand, of evenings spent in parks and cafes. To Richard, these reports were damning. They confirmed his fear that someone had found a way past his daughter's defenses, someone he could neither buy nor intimidate. His fury grew, fueled not only by arrogance, but also by guilt he could not face. When he finally summoned Eva to his study, it was less of a conversation and more of an edict. Surrounded by monitors streaming stock tickers, leather-bound chairs that reeked of power and the sterile coldness of his empire, Richard commanded her to end all contact. He dismissed Daniel as a manipulator, accused him of preying on her vulnerability, and belittled Eva's worth as though her disability made her incapable of being truly wanted. For Eva, the cruelty of those words pierced deeper than the accident itself. She realized her father still saw her not as a woman capable of love, but as a broken liability to be managed. She fought back with a sharpness that startled them both, declaring that she was not sheltered but imprisoned, that Daniel and Lily truly saw her in ways her father never had. But Richard, accustomed to bending boardrooms to his will, threatened to destroy Daniel's livelihood, to drag them into legal battles that would crush them. He left her cornered, torn between protecting the man and child who had given her back her sense of belonging and facing the full weight of her father's ruthless power. That night, trembling with despair, Eva sent Daniel a message that broke her own heart. She told him she could not see him anymore. She begged him not to reach out. And with every word she typed, she felt as though she was betraying the fragile, beautiful possibility that had begun to grow inside her. Daniel read the message over and over, staring at the screen as if the words might shift into something different if he willed them hard enough. But the sentences remained the same, cold, final, laced with apologies that sounded nothing like the Eva he had come to know. He sat in the quiet of his living room, the glow of his phone casting shadows on his weary face, and the silence pressed down heavier than the tools in his workshop ever could. Hours passed before Lily padded out of her bedroom, rubbing her eyes, sensing in the way only children can that her father's heart had broken. She climbed onto his lap and studied his face, and when she asked why he was sad, his voice cracked as he explained that Miss Eva couldn't see them anymore. Lily grew still, her little brow furrowed in thought. Then after a long silence, she whispered that Eva still loved them, because the smiles she gave when they were together were real smiles, not the pretend ones she saved for everyone else. Following days were hollow. Daniel respected Eva's wishes even though it felt like holding his breath underwater. His workshop, once alive with the scent of fresh-cut wood and the promise of creation, became suffocating. Each unfinished table, each half-carved piece, seemed to mock the stories he had wanted to share with her. Lily's cheer dimmed too, her songs quiet, her drawings less colorful. On the fourth day, when she asked if Eva no longer wanted them because they weren't rich, Daniel felt something snap inside him. It was not rage, but determination, the unyielding resolve of a man who could not allow his daughter to grow up believing that love was measured in bank accounts. He took Lily by the hand, and together they drove to the Lancaster estate, a world of high walls and iron gates meant to keep ordinary people out. The mansion loomed like a monument to power, its windows glowing with sterile light, its gardens trimmed to perfection yet devoid of warmth. At the gate, the security guard shook, his head politely but firmly, explaining that their names were not on the list. Daniel stood quietly, unwilling to make a scene, but Lily pressed her face between the iron bars and called out with all the innocence and longing in her small body. Her voice carried across the manicured lawn, pleading for Eva to come back, reminding her that she was missed, reminding her that she was loved. Inside the mansion, Eva sat in her room, the heavy silence broken only by the faint hum of machinery and the footsteps of staff moving about their duties. When she heard Lily's voice float through the rain, her heart clenched with unbearable force. She wheeled herself to the window and saw them there. Daniel standing tall with quiet strength, Lily's small frame pressed against the gate. Something inside Eva that had long been bent under the weight of obedience finally snapped back into place, not broken but restored, like a bone realigned after years of pain. She realized then that in her desperate attempt to protect them from her father's wrath, she was instead destroying the very bond that had given her life meaning again. With a rush of determination, she maneuvered to the service elevator, avoiding the grand staircase where her father might be. In the kitchen, Maria, the cook who had known her since childhood, took one look at her tear-stained face and opened the back door without question, whispering for her to be happy. The rain met her instantly, cold and unrelenting, but Eva pushed forward, her arms burning as she propelled her wheelchair down the slick path. Each movement was a declaration of defiance, each drop of rain a baptism washing away years of submission. By the time she reached the familiar door of Sweet Memories Bakery, she was soaked through, trembling but unyielding. Inside the bakery, Daniel and Lily sat at the very table where their story had begun, their faces etched with the kind of exhaustion that comes from waiting for something your soul refuses to give up on. When the bell chimed and Eva rolled in, drenched and desperate, Lily leapt from her chair and wrapped her arms around her without hesitation. Her little voice cried out in joy, proclaiming that she knew Eva would return, that love had not been abandoned. Daniel stood slowly, his eyes taking in her state, the soaked dress clinging to her, the trembling in her hands, the fire in her eyes. He draped his jacket over her shoulders, his hands lingering for a moment, as if to ground her, and asked in a voice barely above a whisper why she had come. Eva lifted her face, rain and tears indistinguishable, and spoke with a clarity that left no room for doubt. She was choosing. She was choosing him. She was choosing Lily. She was choosing love over fear, freedom over imprisonment, life over survival. Daniel knelt beside her, searching her face for hesitation, but what he saw instead was resolve. She admitted she knew her father could make things difficult, that he could unleash his power in ways meant to destroy them. But she had already lost the use of her legs and refused to lose her heart too. She reached for him, her fingers brushing against his jaw, her touch steady despite the storm around them. She declared that he and Lily were her heart now, and that no threat could take that away. The moment was shattered by the forceful crash of the door as Richard Lancaster burst inside. Rain dripping from his expensive suit, fury radiating from every line of his face. He had tracked her phone, followed her movements, determined to drag her back into the fortress of his control. His voice boomed through the bakery, demanding that she return home, insisting that this nonsense end immediately. But before Eva could speak, Lily stepped forward, small and fearless, and placed herself between the man of towering wealth and the woman who had become her second mother. Her words were simple, unvarnished, and devastating. She told him he was mean, that being a father was about being present, not about money, that he had made Eva cry when fathers were supposed to wipe away tears. The truth spilled from her lips with the purity only a child possesses, and for the first time in years, Richard found himself speechless. He insisted that he was protecting his daughter, but Lily shook her head, saying he was only protecting himself from sadness. Her comparison was unrelenting. Her father also carried grief, but did not run from it, choosing instead to remain, to stay. The bakery fell into silence, the storm outside beating against the windows as if to underscore them. Confrontation. Richard looked at Eva, really looked at her, and saw not the broken liability he had convinced himself she was, but his daughter, alive with determination, defended by a carpenter and a child, radiant in her defiance. His voice cracked when he tried to speak, but Eva cut through the moment with a truth he had avoided for years. She told him that when she awoke terrified in the hospital, she had not needed money or machines. She had needed her father. She told him that she was not a problem to be solved, but his daughter, a daughter who had found love in a man who saw her whole even when she was broken. The weight of her words broke something in him. His shoulders sagged, his polished mask crumbled, and he lowered himself into a chair as though every year of his life had finally caught up to him. Rain battered the windows while silence wrapped the room, broken only by the sound of his quiet confession. He admitted that when his wife had died, he had buried his grief in work, believing he could build something greater in her memory. When Eva had been hurt, he had faced a wound no empire could heal, and in his helplessness, he had chosen control over compassion. His voice faltered as he whispered that he was useless, a failure both as a father and as a man. Daniel's voice entered then, steady and firm. He explained that Richard was not useless, only afraid. He shared that he too had wanted to give up after Sarah's death, that he too had been swallowed by sorrow, but Lily had needed him, so he had learned to live with fear and still remain present. He told Richard that Eva needed the same from him, not wealth, not protection, just presence. The storm outside raged as if the heavens themselves bore witness to the unraveling of years of silence and distance. Richard sat slumped, weighed down by regret, but for the first time his eyes were not the calculating eyes of a CEO. They were the eyes of a father staring at the daughter he had nearly lost. Eva wheeled closer, her hand trembling as she reached for his, and when he clutched it as though it were his lifeline, something long buried inside both of them surfaced. She told him gently that healing would come one day at a time, the way She had learned to live in her chair, not as a sudden miracle, but as a choice to keep moving forward. His tears fell freely, mingling with hers, and in that moment, the barriers of pride and fear collapsed. Lily, with her uncanny sense of timing, broke the heaviness with the pure voice of a child who wanted only love. She asked if this meant they could all be a family. Her small eyes filled with hope as she confessed she wished Eva could be her mother. Her words pierced through the tension and left a fragile silence hanging in the bakery. Then smiles broke through tears as laughter followed. Hesitant at first, but quickly genuine. Richard looked at the little girl who had spoken with the courage of 10 grown men, and then turned to Daniel, realizing that in this man his daughter had found something no fortune could provide. His voice wavered as he admitted he wanted to try to learn how to be a father again, and perhaps a grandfather if they would allow it. Eva squeezed his hand, whispering through tears that they would like that very much. The months that followed were not easy, but they were filled with change. Richard stepped back from his empire, promoting others to carry the burdens he had once hoarded. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to breathe without charts or deadlines dictating his worth. He accompanied Eva to therapy sessions, learning to help her transfer, to stretch, to face physical challenges not as problems to solve, but as shared battles. The walls of his mansion softened as laughter returned, as Eva and Lily filled the halls with voices that rang brighter than any boardroom victory. Slowly, trust began to rebuild, not overnight, but brick by brick, father and daughter stitching together the fragments of what had been torn. When Eva and Daniel announced their engagement, the choice of venue was never in question. Sweet Memories Bakery had been the place where a lonely birthday turned into the birth of something greater, and so it became the sacred ground for their wedding. On her 23rd birthday, ribbons and flowers adorned the small shop, the same table where their story began transformed into an altar. Eva wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to flow gracefully around her chair, and Lily, in her sunshine yellow dress, carried flowers down the aisle with a seriousness that belied her years. Richard walked beside his daughter, one hand on her shoulder, whispering through tears that she looked beautiful and that her mother would be proud. Eva smiled and told him her mother would be proud of him too, proud that he had found his way back. The vows they exchanged were not lofty promises of perfection, but humble acknowledgments of their brokenness and the strength it created. Daniel pledged to always see her, not the chair, not the scars, but the woman who had saved him and his daughter from a half-lived existence. He promised to push when she was tired, to carry when needed, but above all to choose her, every day, again and again. Eva spoke of how Daniel and Lily had given her back the possibility of joy, of how they had shown her that her limitations did not define her, that love could rebuild futures she had thought lost forever. She vowed to be the mother Lily deserved, and the partner Daniel needed, choosing them as her family in every moment to come. Their kiss sealed more than a marriage. It sealed the creation of a family forged not by perfection, but by resilience, love, and choice. Laughter erupted when Lily cheered louder than anyone, declaring the moment the happiest day ever. The reception filled the bakery with music and dancing. Daniel's carpenter friends strummed bluegrass. Richard clapped along awkwardly, but with genuine joy. And Eva spun her wheelchair with abandon while Lily twirled circles around her. The bakery owner, who had witnessed the first spark of their connection, looked on with pride as if he had been entrusted with a story greater than any cake he could ever bake. Richard surprised everyone when he stood and addressed the room, his voice trembling yet steady with newfound humility. He admitted that he had once believed success meant control, meant never needing anyone, but his daughter and her new family had taught him otherwise. True strength, he confessed, came from vulnerability, from connection, from choosing love over fear. He thanked Daniel for seeing what he could not, thanked Lily for her innocent courage, and thanked Eva for forgiving him enough to let him back into her heart. The applause that followed was not for the CEO, But for a man learning to be a father again, as the evening waned, Eva rolled outside for a breath of fresh air. The stars sparkled against the night sky, rare and bright as though the universe itself was offering its blessing. Daniel followed, carrying a slice of cake, teasing gently that no one should eat cake alone. She laughed, remembering the first words he had ever spoken to her, and pulled him down for a kiss. She asked softly if she would ever be alone again, and his answer was certain as he reminded her that she had him. She had Lily, she had her father, and she had something even more, she had a future. His hand rested gently on her stomach, his eyes knowing before she could speak. He whispered that Lily had already guessed the truth, that another life was joining their story. Tears slipped down Eva's cheeks as she confessed her fears, the complications doctors had warned her about. But Daniel's gaze was unwavering as he promised they would face it together as they had faced everything else. 6 months later, Eva cradled their newborn son in her arms, his tiny fingers curling around hers. They named him Samuel Richard, honoring both Sarah's father and the grandfather who had found redemption. Richard held his grandson with trembling hands, whispering apologies and promises in the same breath, and Lily, now a proud big sister, leaned over with solemn wisdom to tell the baby that their family was special because they had chosen each other. Daniel stood beside Eva, their fingers entwined, watching the life that had unfolded from one moment of kindness in a bakery. Years before Eva thought of the wish she had made on her 22nd birthday, this simple plea not to be alone anymore. She smiled through tears as she realized how abundantly that wish had been answered. She had found love, she had found family, and she had found hope in places she never expected. The accident had stolen her legs, but life had given her a new journey, one built wheel by wheel, hand in hand, heart to heart. And as she whispered a prayer of gratitude for the broken road that led her here, the stars above seemed to echo back her joy. Daniel stepped onto the balcony of their home with a small plate in his hand, the slice of cake carefully balanced as though it carried more meaning than any banquet ever could. He set it down in front of Eva and smiled with that same warmth she had first seen in the bakery. He reminded her, gently and playfully, that no one should ever eat cake alone. The words wrapped around her like a promise, echoing back to the day when their lives had first intertwined. Eva laughed softly and pulled him closer, her lips brushing his as she whispered that she would never be alone again. His answer was steady, certain, filled with love that left no room for doubt. She had him, she had Lily, she had her father, and she had the child growing inside her. His hand rested on her stomach, a gesture of tenderness and certainty, and she felt the future press close in that simple touch. Her eyes widened at his knowing look, surprised because she had planned to tell him tomorrow, but he already understood. When she asked how, his grin widened, and he confessed that Lily had told him, proudly claiming she had solved the mystery of Eva's morning sickness. Already, their daughter was planning lessons for the baby, preparing to share every joy and every story. Eva's tears came then, not from fear but from gratitude, and when she admitted that the doctors had warned of complications, Daniel knelt beside her and assured her that they would face everything together, just as they always had, side by side, hand in hand, heart with heart. 6 months later, in a quiet hospital room filled with light and laughter, Eva cradled their newborn son. They named him Samuel Richard, honoring both Daniel's past and the father who had learned how to love again. Richard held the baby with trembling hands, whispering words of devotion as Lily leaned in with solemn authority to explain that their family was different, chosen, special, bound not only by blood, but by choice. Daniel stood by Eva's side, their fingers intertwined, marveling at the journey that had carried them from loneliness to this abundance of love. It had not been an easy road. There had been moments when fear tried to steal back the ground they had gained, when Richard slipped toward old habits, when Daniel's grief resurfaced, when Eva's doubts crept in during long nights of uncertainty. But each time, they chose to keep moving forward, wheel by wheel, step by step, day by day. They had learned that love was not about perfection, but about presence, about showing up even when the storm raged, about believing that broken pieces could still create something whole. As Eva looked around that room, at her father gently rocking his grandson, at Lily's laughter spilling bright as she tried to make Samuel smile, at Daniel's eyes shining with love and gratitude, she thought back to the wish she had made on her 22nd birthday. It had been a small wish, whispered over candles she thought no one would ever share with her again. She had wished not to be alone. Life, in its mysterious and unpredictable way, had given her so much more. She had been given a love that saw beyond her scars, a family forged not in ease but in resilience, and a future that promised joy in places she never expected to find it. As Samuel's tiny fingers curled around her pinky, Eva closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks for the broken road that had led her home. And outside the window, the stars glittered against the night sky, the same stars that had once witnessed her loneliness, now watching over a family bound together by choice, by hope, and by love that would be chosen again and again. For every birthday yet to come, she wished not to be alone. And life gave her a love and a family greater than she ever imagined.